It always starts with a smile, a clink of glasses, a warm pat on the back. I am so proud of you. But somewhere behind that smile is a blade made of envy, sharpened with silent comparison. Have you ever stood in front of someone you love or trust, maybe a childhood friend, a colleague, even a sibling, and felt tension? Not hostility, not cruelty, just something unsaid, a hesitation in their praise, a strange pause when you share good news, a flicker in their eye like the glint of ice under moonlight. Welcome to the world of the jealous saboteur, a person who wears the mask of closeness but dances in the shadows of competition. They're not strangers. They're not loud villains. They're often the ones you invite in. You've shared secrets, shared tears, but while you grew wings, they grew resentment. He who envies admits his inferiority. Pliny the Elder. Jealousy has existed as long as love, art, and fire. In Greek mythology, Hera, goddess of marriage, became a furious punisher whenever she felt threatened or overshadowed. In the Bible, Cain kills Abel not out of evil, but envy, the oldest sibling rivalry. And in Shakespeare's Othello, Iago sows destruction not for justice, but because he hates being second. This story isn't about villains. It's about the quiet erosion of closeness. How admiration turns sour. How someone who once held your hand starts pulling you down, bit by bit, subtly, silently, all while claiming to love you. So why does this happen? Why would someone who laughs with you, jokes with you, celebrates you, also secretly resent you? Psychologists call this covert narcissistic rivalry, a dynamic where someone appears supportive but cannot psychologically tolerate another's success, growth, or happiness because it threatens their internal narrative of self-worth. It is not enough to succeed. Others must fail. Rain Gorbidal. They don't always plan it. They may not even be fully aware, but their subconscious becomes a battlefield of comparison. Every time you rise, their insecurity deepens. And from that pain, they act. Not with open malice, but underhanded sabotage. Subtle discouragement. Are you sure you're ready for that promotion? It sounds stressful. Backhanded praise. Wow, I never thought you would pull that off. Undermining gossip, shared not with enemies, but with mutuals. Sudden distance the moment you're in the spotlight. They tell themselves it's harmless, that they are just being honest. But truthfully, it's jealousy in disguise. Imagine this. You're a child in a vast desert clutching a small lantern. You believe your friend is walking beside you. But as you move forward, the light grows brighter, and they begin to retreat. Not because they fear the dark, but because they hate how your light reminds them of their own shadows. This is the paradox of the jealous saboteur. They may care for you, and yet they cannot help but hope you stumble, because every one of your triumphs feels like a personal failure to them. In the tragedy, you might never see it coming until the day the knife finally slips through the veil of friendship. Not a violent betrayal, but a quiet one, a missed celebration, a rumor that came from someone who meant well, a silence that stung louder than any scream. Before we go further, I want you to pause. Think of someone who once seemed like your biggest cheerleader, but whose energy, in hindsight, always left you doubting yourself. Someone who subtly competed, who always found a way to one-up, who disappeared when things went well for you. Hold that image. Because in this episode, we're going to unmask this archetype. We'll explore the psychological roots of the jealous saboteur, the behavioral red flags most people overlook, the silent damage caused by emotional rivalry, and how to heal and protect yourself without becoming bitter. This isn't just about calling out others. It's about asking, have we ever been the saboteur? Let's begin. The jealous saboteur doesn't arrive with a sword, but with a smile. They won't burn your house down, but they'll loosen the bolts, whispering to the wind to do the rest. This is not the villain in a trench coat. This is the best friend who was there when you cried, the co-worker who celebrated your promotion, the sibling who said, "I'm proud of you." And yet, when your light shines too brightly, their gaze flickers, just for a second, and you feel it. That sting. So who are they, really? Psychologically, the jealous saboteur is not purely malicious. They're wounded, deeply. Beneath the surface lives an inner child, frozen at the moment they first learned love had conditions, that worth came only with comparison. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden, unconscious parts of the self we reject, repress, and disown. For the saboteur, this shadow is soaked in inadequacy. They've buried it beneath layers of forced positivity, but it leaks through backhanded compliments, subtle undermining, or passive-aggressive support. You're doing amazing. I could never be that lucky. Wow, another award? Must be nice having that kind of help. No offense, but I just don't get why people admire your work so much. Each comment is a tiny paper cut. Not enough to make you bleed, just enough to sting and linger. Envy is the art of counting the other fellow's blessings instead of your own. Harold Coffin. But the saboteur rarely acknowledges envy. That's the tragedy and the danger. Because when pain is denied, it doesn't disappear. It festers. Let's pause and ask, what if this isn't just about them? Have you ever felt a flicker of jealousy so sharp it scared you? Have you smiled through clenched teeth when a friend succeeded before you did? Have you ever felt forgotten while someone else basked in the light? Let's be honest, most of us have. The difference lies in what we do with that feeling. The saboteur, rather than transforming envy into inspiration, lets it rot into resentment. They build inner narratives. She's only successful because of her connections. He's not better, he's just louder. If I had what they have, I'd do it even better. These narratives are shields, defense mechanisms protecting a fragile ego. Freud identified this as reaction formation, when a person behaves in the opposite way to how they truly feel. Praise on the outside, poison on the inside. The modern jealous saboteur is a master of psychological disguise. Their game is played in nuance. A look too long, a silence too loud, a like never given. They may share your posts, but never your victories. They may listen to your dreams, but never your growth. It's like being embraced with one arm while the other clutches a dagger behind their back. In 2023, the American Psychological Association cited a rise in relational aggression in adult friendships, a form of covert manipulation, emotional withdrawal, and back-channel sabotage that mimics schoolyard jealousy, but with adult consequences. Source: APA Monitor on Psychology, July 2023. But we don't confront them. Why? Because it's awkward. Because they're our friend. Because maybe, just maybe, we're afraid they'll say what we secretly fear. That we didn't deserve it after all. And so, we stay silent. Or worse, we start to shrink ourselves, to dim our light, to second-guess our joy. Be careful who you tell good news to. Jordan Peterson. Some might dismiss this as paranoia, but it's not. It's pattern recognition. And the more you grow, the louder the silence of the jealous becomes. They won't say, I'm proud of you. But they will say, must be nice to have that kind of time. They won't say, congratulations, but they will say, I didn't know they gave awards for that. Words crafted not to hurt, but to hollow you. This isn't about being overly sensitive. It's about emotional reality. Subtle sabotage from a close one triggers more confusion than open criticism from a stranger. It's betrayal in velvet gloves. Let's take a moment to breathe here. What does this mean for us, not just as observers, but as participants in the human experience? Have you, in your quietest moments, envied a friend, doubted their success, wondered, why not me? That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. The key lies in what you choose next, because where envy ends, sabotage begins. And sometimes the person we need to confront most isn't them. It's the shadow in ourselves that claps with one hand while the other clenches into a fist. They walk beside you, but they're not with you. This is the paradox of the jealous saboteur. They play the role so well, the loyal friend, the supportive colleague, the loving partner, that even you begin to question your own intuition. It's a performance, and you're part of the audience. Let's shift the lens now. Let's look at the world around us. Not the theories, not the abstract. The real people who have lived in the shadows of those who claim to love them. Scene 1, the silent rivalry and fame. Consider the tragic story of Selena Quintanilla, the beloved Latin pop star who rose to fame in the 90s. Her life was ended by Yolanda Saldivar, the woman who had once been her biggest fan, her friend, and the president of her fan club. Saldivar wasn't an enemy from the outside. She was inside the inner circle. She didn't hate Selena. She adored her. And yet, when Selena's light outgrew Yolanda's shadow, the resentment grew intolerable. Yolanda sabotaged her from within, and eventually, she ended her. This is an extreme case, but the psychology isn't unique. When someone builds their identity around being your supporter, your growth can feel like betrayal. If your success outpaces their illusion of importance in your life, their loyalty can twist into destruction. That's the cost of ego tied to validation. Scene 2, the friend who never claps. You've probably had someone like this. You post an achievement, maybe a graduation, a new project, a personal milestone. Most people applaud, but one person stays quiet. You notice it, even if you don't say it. Later, they might mention it in passing. I saw your little project thing. Looks like you're really trying to make it big. They say little. They say trying. Language like that isn't casual. It's calculated. The jealous saboteur often uses minimization, a subtle form of verbal sabotage designed to make your accomplishments feel smaller, more accidental, less earned. This is not about critique. This is about corrosion. Scene 3, the office undercurrent. A 2022 study by Harvard Business Review revealed that workplace envy is among the top 5 sources of covert conflict in high-performing teams. This kind of jealousy doesn't always appear as open sabotage. It's the colleague who forgets to see you, who questions your decisions in meetings, who praises you in public but spreads doubt in private. One respondent in the study shared, "She congratulated me for landing the client, then later told our boss she was the one who gave me the lead. I only found out when my promotion was delayed." The sabotage isn't always dramatic, but it's always intentional. Jealousy is rarely passive. Scene 4, the subtle sibling rivalry. Now return to childhood. Picture 2 siblings, one always in the spotlight, the other in the corner, maybe not unloved, but unnoticed. Fast forward 20 years. The quiet sibling is now the one in charge of family gatherings. They bring the wine, they organize birthdays. But every time you share a story, every time your laughter fills the room, they interrupt, correct, undermine. Just a little. No fights, just friction. Sibling dynamics are often where the saboteur is born, not from hate, but from years of subtle comparison. And now, as adults, those seeds sprout thorns. Have you had moments like these, where you walked away from someone you trusted, feeling smaller but unsure why? Have you ever celebrated something only to feel the need to hide it around a certain person? That feeling isn't insecurity, it's intuition. Psychology tells us that our bodies often detect microaggressions before our minds rationalize them. It's called limbic resonance, the idea that humans emotionally tune into each other like instruments in an orchestra. When someone silently resents you, you feel it, even if they never say it out loud. And yet, we doubt ourselves, because to acknowledge the saboteur means to admit the betrayal, to risk loneliness, to confront that those we thought were on our team may never have been. But here's the twist. Sometimes the saboteur is us. Have you ever been the one who watched someone else shine and felt that ache? Not just admiration, but discomfort. Maybe you laughed too little, shared too late, changed the subject too fast. That doesn't make you a villain. It makes you vulnerable. And it's in that space of honesty where transformation begins. A brief interlude, the metaphor of the glass mask. Imagine walking through life with a glass mask on. It shows your smile, your cheer, your celebration for others. But behind the transparency is a face that twitches, not in hatred, but in fear. Fear that if they rise, you fall. Fear that if they win, you lose. Fear that there's only so much light and not enough for both. But that's the lie. The real saboteur is scarcity thinking, the belief that someone else's success steals your worth. This belief is the root of sabotage. But worth isn't pie, joy isn't finite, and sunlight doesn't run out. If we could shatter the glass, face our shadows, maybe then we could become not rivals, but reflections, mirrors for each other's greatness. Let's take a moment to sit still in the silence. The kind of silence that only follows a betrayal you didn't see coming. In that space, words from great thinkers and artists echo like a distant drumbeat, reminding us that this pain, this complexity, is deeply human. And yet, within these echoes, we also find maps, wisdom wrapped in metaphor, truth that survives the centuries. Let's begin with a voice sharp as shattered glass. The worst pain in the world goes beyond the physical, even further beyond any other emotional pain one can feel. It is the betrayal of a friend. Heather Brewer. This quote, haunting in its simplicity, cuts to the essence of the jealous saboteur. Betrayal that does not come from enemies. The pain pierces because the hand that wounds is familiar, trusted, sometimes loved. Psychologically, this mirrors the concept of betrayal trauma, introduced by Dr. Jennifer Fried. When betrayal is committed by someone we rely on, emotionally or socially, the trauma doesn't just hurt, it confuses. Our identity becomes entangled with the saboteur's approval, even after the wound is made. So we deny it, rationalize it. We say, they didn't mean it. We whisper, maybe I'm just being too sensitive. But your body remembers, and no amount of logic can silence that intuitive sting. Let's look at another timeless whisper, this time from the world of the stage. Et tu, Brute? Julius Caesar, Shakespeare. 3 words, but inside them, 1,000 knives. This line, spoken in Shakespeare's retelling of Caesar's assassination, is the moment the emperor realizes that his friend Brutus is among the conspirators. Not an enemy, not a rival, a friend. The pain isn't just the blade, it's the meaning behind the blade. Modern psychoanalysis refers to this as cognitive betrayal dissonance, the internal collapse when someone you've emotionally invested in becomes a source of harm. Your brain doesn't know how to reconcile it, so it splits. Love and distrust now share the same space. This is why the saboteur doesn't just hurt us, they fragment us. Let's pause here. Think about someone in your life who once celebrated you, encouraged you, spoke your name in rooms you weren't in. Then, something shifted. Not loudly, not violently, just less warmth, less pride, more passive remarks, more comparison. And one day you realized they were no longer cheering. They were competing. Comparison is the thief of joy. Theodore Roosevelt. This quote is often repeated like a mantra, but its true meaning digs deep into our modern world. Social psychologist Leon Festinger developed the social comparison theory in the 1950s, suggesting that humans measure their self-worth not by internal standards, but through relative positioning to others. When we win but someone else wins bigger, our victory feels smaller. The saboteur lives here, not in absolute failure, but in relative envy. This is especially potent in today's world, where social media has made everyone else's success hypervisible. Your friend's wedding, your colleague's TED Talk, your classmate's new startup. You scroll and you compare. And maybe, just maybe, you hope they fail a little. Not because you're cruel, but because the shadow whispers, if they rise, where does that leave me? Let's soften that shadow with a glimmer of Eastern wisdom. When another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself. He does not need punishment. He needs help. Thich Nhat Hanh. This is the invitation to look at the saboteur not as a monster, but as a mirror. To ask not, why are they trying to hurt me? But, what wound in them feels threatened by my light? This doesn't mean you excuse them or let them stay, but it means you don't need to carry their brokenness as your own. Let's take a breath. Remember, you are not too much. You are not too bright. Their discomfort with your joy is not your shame to carry. Let's go one layer deeper now, with a less quoted but piercing line from author and philosopher Alain de Botton. One of the cruelest things a person can do is to awaken someone's love without the intention of truly loving them. Let's adapt this for our context. One of the cruelest things a friend can do is to awaken your trust without the intention of preserving it. Trust is sacred. When you open your ambitions, fears, and victories to someone, you give them emotional leverage. The saboteur takes that gift and twists it. Sometimes it's overt. Sometimes it's just a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. But either way, your emotional map begins to change. You trust less, guard more, and suddenly your joy feels lonely. If you're hearing this and thinking, this is too familiar, you're not broken. You're becoming aware. This awareness is painful, but it's the gateway to clarity, and clarity is freedom. Let's close this chapter with one final quote, not to end the story, but to turn the page. Your light does not dim the light of others. It only invites them to shine too. You do not need to shrink to be loved. You do not need to make yourself smaller to make others feel safe. The jealous saboteur wants you to believe your brightness is a threat. But the truth is, your brilliance is a mirror, reflecting what's possible. So keep shining. The right ones will not just watch you glow, they'll glow with you. Imagine standing on a quiet rooftop. City lights below, a gentle breeze brushes your skin, and beside you, someone you once called friend. Their laughter once made you feel seen. Their eyes once lit up at your success. But tonight, there's a distance, not physical, emotional, like two planets slowly drifting out of orbit. You look at them, and somewhere beneath the layers, you realize they were never clapping for you. They were clapping for the version of you that stayed behind them. This is the moment the mask falls. It doesn't fall with drama or flames. It falls in silence, in a delayed reply, a half-hearted compliment, a passive dig dressed as advice. And when it does, you're faced with a choice. Do I dim my light to keep this friendship intact? Or do I rise anyway, even if it means walking alone? Many never choose. They stay in between, stuck in emotional limbo, waiting for the saboteur to come around. But the truth is, some people are not meant to grow with you. Some are only meant to teach you how to spot dimmers in your life. Let's take a moment and shift lenses from story to science. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a clinical psychologist and narcissism expert, describes jealous saboteurs as covert narcissists in disguise. They thrive not by overt dominance, but by subtle undermining, passive-aggressive remarks, withholding praise, imitating your ideas and calling it inspiration. They don't oppose your success. They mirror it, just enough to distort it. In fact, a 2021 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals high in narcissistic vulnerability often experience intense envy when peers succeed, leading to compensatory behaviors like gossip, withdrawal, or sabotage. The sabotaging friend isn't always malicious. Often they're in pain, insecure, lost. But your job is not to rescue them at the expense of your own growth. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not arrogant for celebrating your wins. And you are not cruel for walking away from people who can't clap for you sincerely. Read that again. Let it settle in your chest like a seed finding soil. Now let's return to our rooftop metaphor. You look at your friend, you smile, not out of bitterness, but from understanding. And then you turn, you walk back inside, down the stairs, out into the world. It's colder, but it's real. And in that reality, there's space for new people, for honest laughter, for shared victories that don't need to be tiptoed around. Because here's the truth. The people who truly love you will never resent your light. They'll bask in it, reflect it, celebrate it. They'll see your blooming not as a threat, but as an invitation to rise too. Let that be your compass. Not guilt, not history, not fear of loneliness. Just one simple rule. Go where your joy is welcome. Go where your light is safe. As the screen begins to dim, one last quote appears in soft lettering. If your circle doesn't inspire you, it's not a circle, it's a cage. Let today be the day you start unlocking the door. You don't owe anyone your dimming. You owe yourself the sky. This is Unmask, and this was episode 9. The jealous saboteur, friend or secret rival. Let the mask fall. Then walk into the light you never needed permission to hold.